Hey, welcome to the show, friends. He's Mike. I'm Ryan. It's Eggs. This is Eggs. This is Eggs.
What's Eggs?
Eggs is a podcast about all things creative, regardless of what that means to you. From the creativity involved in launching a business, building a brand, crafting an entertainment career, or whatever, we'll talk about the process of growing your eggs from start to finish.
How you doing?
Better now. So, how was the week since we've actually pre-recorded the previous episode a week in advance because Mike was doing some travel this week and has recently come back. So, Mike, tell us about your trip.
Oh, it was a good one. I went to Seattle again. That seems to be the destination of sorts.
Yeah, there seems to be a trend here.
Yeah, I think I do that pretty regularly. Left not last Thursday, but the Thursday before, and I played in Idaho Thursday night, drove overnight, and got to Anacortes at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Then I decided I should probably take a nap. But I laid down, got to sleep for about an hour and a half, and the sun kind of creeped in. And so it turned into a sauna. And so I woke up just in a hot sweat, and it was horrible. So I ended up playing that night with an hour and a half of sleep, and it actually ended up being a really fun show.
It was great. Where do you play at when you're in Anacortes?
I played a venue called the Brown Lantern. It's kind of like a little dive bar that a lot of my friends are bartenders there. I have a pretty good history of playing in Anacortes, and when I played at an old bar there called the Watertown. It was an Irish bar, and when the owner ended up closing that down, and when that happened, the Brown Lantern pulled me over, and I went from doing a weekly gig in Anacortes to doing once a month, and I like it better that way. It's it's almost too much if you play in the same small city every week. People kind of get used to it, and it's just not as enticing to get people out. Now that I'm only there once a month, it makes it where it's kind of like
Get a little better draw.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one of the other big things going on this week, I guess I should let you finish. Anything else in Seattle or anything else going on up there that was great or fun or interesting?
Oh, well, it was Memorial Day weekend, so a lot of barbecues. Shout out to Scott. Your barbecue was amazing. That food was... that guy can barbecue.
The bee's knees.
Yeah. So I got a little networking in because of that. I was able to go and visit with... Scott, he's a DJ for Moving 92.5 there, and went out to a few venues and saw some friends. I only worked on Friday night. I had Saturday night off, so I kind of jumped around from venue to venue, went up on the hill, stopped in at Rhino Room and the Woods, and said hi to Dev from Portland, and Blue Eyed Soul was there, and Cut. DJ Cut was...
As I was going to say, I hope these are all DJs. Otherwise, you've got a weird group of friends.
Yeah, well,
maybe it's both.
A little bit of both.
But, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but one of the key things that you just mentioned was networking.
Oh, yeah.
And sort of the importance of that. And we'll circle back around to that here in a little bit. But networking is maybe one of the most important things we could be doing, day to day. I mean, in fact, this podcast is sort of designed as a little bit of a networking tool. And so I think that, you going out, even though you only played the one night, taking that time to actually get out, meet some people, network with club owners and different DJs in the area, I think is all probably, really good for your career and the business you're in.
Well, I ended up going to the last venue I stopped at was the Ballroom in Fremont, and I play there pretty much consistently once a month. Usually I'll play at the Brown Lantern, and then the next day I play at the Ballroom. And coming in and being, a DJ that only shows up once a month, I've been playing there for 2 years, but I don't really know the staff. Like I didn't really know
you're regular,
just
not regular enough.
Yeah. And so, one of the bartenders that works there was moving, and so they were having like a little get together afterwards. And so I went and I was able to hang out with all the people that worked at the ballroom, and it was actually a really good time to meet them on a social level versus, hey, you're working. I obviously can't hold a conversation because you have customers you have to deal with. So it was kind of nice to actually sit down and talk with people.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, and, back to our discussion in a previous episode about personal relationships, that's where that begins, spending that time with people. So one of the other things I wanted to get into a little bit before we get into our topic of the day is I wanted to talk a little bit about actually publishing this podcast. We have been working on this thing for a few weeks now, or a month now. It sort of has been talked about for a year now, but we're finally doing it. And one of the big things that I think would be helpful for other people who might be interested in doing something like this is talking a little bit about the process of actually getting it published. One of the primary things behind eggs is this concept of growing, from an egg to, I guess, to a bird or whatever comes out of your egg.
Omelet.
Yeah, an omelet. And sometimes it ends as an omelet. Hopefully this one won't. But
I like omelets. That's a good thing.
Well, yeah, no, an omelet's fantastic. I'm just saying that seems like a fail if you're splattered all over a pan, so we need to actually mature to something.
Okay, we're going to be a chick.
Right. Well,
a hatchling. Soaring eagle.
I like that, soaring eagle. So in order to become a soaring eagle, one must go through a process, regardless of what you're doing, whether it's an invention or a radio show, in this case a podcast, or a website, or any other project that you might be undergoing. And so I think it's important to talk a little bit about that process. And we just happen to be going through this one right now, so we can actually talk about it a little bit and let people understand, what's gone into actually creating this thing. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is we finally have a logo. So that's a big deal. We're actually on our third episode, and the logo is finally published and ready to go. So for people who have found us on Instagram or SoundCloud or any other place where we're published, you'll start to see the logo creeping up and around. It's been a little low key the last few weeks because we haven't really been able to market anything, but we finally have the logo.
So do you want to kind of break the logo down, like the creative part of it? I can imagine trying to come up with a logo that's centered around eggs wasn't the easiest thing to...
Well, it's funny because it's super easy and super not. So... I mean, an egg is a pretty base concept, so if you're doing something with an egg, it's easy enough to include an egg in your logo, I guess. But one of the things that we were trying to communicate with our logo is that we wanted it to be more than, just a simple corporate logo. It actually needed to represent a show, almost like you would see in show titles or, album covers, that sort of thing. It had to be more than just, a Nike swoosh.
Yeah.
And so because, in this case, it's performing a little bit different job. So we did a bunch of exploration. We tried like text only options. We talked egg only options. We tried to avoid as much as we could being really on the nose with, just showing eggs. But I think we finally landed on something we like, has kind of a nice typographic feel to it. It's got, our little egg with our little wings because we're soaring eagle and all the things we're talking about. And so I think symbolically, it's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of like deep mystery involved in this logo. But there's definitely
no Easter eggs.
Yeah, literally no Easter eggs in this one.
Well, didn't you do something? What's the slogan on the top?
Oh, the slogan on top, and I wish I could remember it off the top of my head because it's in Latin. But basically, it's sort of the core motto of this show, and the reason for the name Eggs was years ago. My now 6-year-old son, who was then probably 2 or 3, had come up with this concept, or just out of nowhere sort of said this phrase, get all the eggs. And for me, that really resonated with me in terms of business and everything else that we're up to in life. Just try and collect all the eggs, do the best you can, collect the most eggs. And so I stuck that on a notepad, and I've sat on it for years trying to figure out a place to make it fit. And finally, it sort of landed on this podcast. So because I'm wildly creative, on the front of the album artwork for these podcasts, you'll see the phrase in Latin, which I'm going to have to look up. But the phrase basically says "get all the eggs" or "collect all the eggs" in Latin.
Cool.
Yeah. So anyway, so that's kind of fun. The next step, or some of the other challenges we've gone through in trying to get this podcast actually live, because we recorded these episodes a couple weeks ago and are just now finally getting them published. And of course, we're talking in relative time because God knows when you'll actually listen to this podcast. So the dates I'm saying now and yesterday probably don't matter that much.
A year from now, you're listening to this.
Right. Yeah. I probably should use less dates. That's how you know I'm not a professional.
Well,
anyway,
it's the egg. We're growing. We're figuring it out.
We're figuring it out as we go. Yeah. So anyway, the process of getting published and getting into the iTunes store, for example, is not particularly difficult, but we still had to make some decisions along the way. There are a number of different hosting services and companies that are already built around podcasting, and so a simple Google search will yield a few different ideas of places where you can host your podcast, which turns out to be the most key piece of this whole thing. You have to have somewhere
where you're going to put it, how you're going to distribute it,
right? And then the distribution piece is another component of that. So we looked at several of them. Most of the big podcasts, the guys that you've heard of, use a company called Libsyn, I think is how you'd pronounce it. But basically, they're sort of like the forerunner. They were probably one of the first few companies doing this, and so they're definitely the most professional solution. We found that,
but they're not cheap.
Yeah, they're not cheap.
And they what was it, like $75 a month?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what it was, but to get to the amount of bandwidth that we assumed we needed, and to be able to store the number of shows that we wanted to store and keep available at all times, it wasn't cost effective for us to use Libsyn right now. Now, I mean, maybe down the road as we this show grows and we get some sponsor bucks or whatever.
What would be the benefit? I mean, we ended up going with SoundCloud, right?
Yeah. Yep. The service we used is SoundCloud. They have a SoundCloud Pro, which is it's remarkably easy to use. And if you've used it for music, or if you used it to listen to music that people have posted, SoundCloud's interface is quite easy to use. I mean, it's not real intense. I mean, there's not a ton of advanced features, but it's very to the point.
Well, it's also kind of cool too, though, because you can change the color of the waveform to match the color of your site. I had a SoundCloud account set up probably 2 or 3 years ago, and because of the licensing issue and being a DJ, they ended up pulling my account down. So I stopped using them. I went to another website called Mixcloud for my music, because there's no
actually allow you to host a remix.
But coming back to SoundCloud, I mean, for this, it's perfect, because we don't have any licensing issues. We don't have any. Our account's not going to get flagged and pulled down because we're playing, a song from Michael Jackson or something.
Yeah, well, and what's great too for a starting podcast, or for anybody who's sort of budget conscious, it's quite affordable. Their professional package, I want to say, is $15 a month, and it seems to do everything we need it to do. It produces a nice little clean RSS feed that's already iTunes ready, so you can quickly submit it to iTunes and a number of other services, Stitcher and the like.
You can enable downloads on it, which is nice. I was actually we're working on getting the website built for this podcast, and I was thinking we'd have to upload our actual episodes and have them be downloaded off of our server. But having the download enable feature with SoundCloud, it actually makes it, right there. If you want it, you can download it.
Yeah, we can actually keep it hosted with SoundCloud, but share it on our website, relatively easily through a little embed code. And by doing that, we're not actually replicating files. We have one master file that's sort of being spread across social networks and websites and everything. And yeah, I mean, God, it couldn't be slicker. And so I would love to hear from other people who are trying to get podcasts and things going. If you have other recommendations or better services or reasons why maybe this isn't the one, I would love to hear it. But so far, I'm pretty pleased. This will be our 3rd episode hosted on there, and with little to no trouble. It's really been pretty great service. So I would encourage you to check that out if you're interested in podcasting. Or if you do anything else, if you're a musician or a spoken word artist or a poet and you want to share your audio files, SoundCloud is really great for all that stuff. So, and as Mike alluded to, we are also going through the process of building out the web page right now. Most people may have had their website ready before they actually went live with the podcast, but we were sort of in a spot where we were delayed because of the time it took us to actually develop the logo and get all that stuff ready to go. The website was also delayed. So
yeah, well, we kind of just sat down and did a podcast without having all our marketing material ready. So now it's a couple weeks. We've had time to build the website, build the logo, and get everything kind of done. And it growing pains. We're there. We're getting there.
Yeah, it's coming together. So, but anyway, it's coming together really nicely. I'm super pleased with everything. I hope Mike's happy too.
Oh yeah.
So anyway,
so sitting back and listening to the first few episodes, I noticed I need to enunciate better because I got a little mumble mouth going on, and you're your own worst critic, and probably sounds fine to everyone else, but for me, I'm sitting there over analyzing the way I talk.
No, it sounded awful. It's definitely something edited. No, I'm the same. We were talking about it a little bit earlier today before we started recording about how we need to project better and we need to be better radio hosts, better voice talent. Unfortunately, neither of us are pros at this, and so we're having to figure it out as we go.
Well, I did a little stint on a radio show back in the day, but all I did was the weather.
Oh, so see, better. I have no excuse.
Yeah.
So anyway, but just to put a bow on that, we're going through a bunch of hurdles trying to get this podcast ready to go and sort of developed, but it's been remarkably easy to do. We have a little bit of an advantage in that Mike is an audio engineer, and he had the equipment ready so that we could actually sit down and record this thing. But even without a major, budget, you can really produce a decent little podcast without a lot of money, a lot of expense, or anything up front.
So maybe I should just break that down a little bit, how we're actually doing this. I'm using Adobe Audition. I was trained normally on Pro Tools, but Pro Tools is so expensive to upgrade. I didn't want to pay, $500-600 to do the upgrade.
Well, and for anybody using Adobe Suite, Creative Suite, Audition's a piece of that. So if you already are paying for an Adobe Creative Suite subscription, which is going to be the case with a lot of listeners to this podcast, especially creative folks and things like that, Audition's already part of your subscription. So you may as well use it, and it will stay current and updated with every new push. Yeah,
so you get the latest and greatest. They have built-in, they have settings where you can just say, okay, I'm doing a podcast, and here's, a compressor for a vocal track, but I'll actually go in and I'll set the compression settings and I'll EQ it and kind of make it sound a little bit better afterwards. But what I do is I have an M-Audio C600 sound card that has 2 mic inputs and 2 headphone outputs, and that's what we're using. Eventually, I'm going to go and invest in some more equipment, more, higher end mics, like some Shure SM7Bs or something like that. Right now, we're just using SM58s. And they're great mics, but they're, they sound fine. And so essentially with a basic $200 or $300 sound card, Adobe Audition, and a couple of mics, that's how we're recording this right now.
Yeah, and that's how we're doing this show. But you easily could, use the mic built into your headphone cable and, QuickTime to record your audio, and you could actually be live, relatively easy. So, if you've been considering building out something like this, having some kind of podcast, or you want to somehow get your ideas or opinions out there, man, it's easy nowadays. You could just about do it all from your iPhone if you had to.
Yeah. I was listening to, I think, Joe Rogan the other day, and he interviewed some guy in a hotel room it was obviously like his iPhone.
Yeah.
And it was what he had at the time. It was an opportunity to do a recording, and there you go.
Yeah, well, and actually the first podcast I was ever on, the one that sort of inspired me to want to do one, this thing called Creative South Podcast out in Georgia, they interviewed me in Cleveland at this creative convention last year, the Weapons of Mass Creation Fest that I went to last year. And dude literally showed up at my hotel at 11:30 at night with a backpack, a Zoom recorder, pair of mics, and that was it.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of thinking about maybe doing an off branch of this called Ontic on the Road, and as I'm in different cities, I kind of want to just sit down and interview my friends, the DJs that are that I'm linking up with there, and do a quick 15 minutes. Hey, tell me about yourself. And
yeah, no, I love that. I think that's awesome.
But anyways,
although I would say, let's just put them on our show. but I do think it would be fun to have something, especially if you're interviewing a lot of DJs, it would be fun to have something for DJs. This particular podcast is meant to be sort of cover all facets of creativity, music included, advertising and marketing included, are sort of both our strengths, but creativity comes in a gazillion forms. And so the idea is that we'll cover a bunch of those in this podcast. Ontic on the Run over here, it might just be all DJs. So,
yeah, you might.
But if you're into the music business, it might be really interesting. And if you're an aspiring DJ, somebody that really likes music and would like to get out there and do that, you could learn infinite amounts of information from these guys.
Yep. So
cool. Well, on that, I want to, and maybe this is a good place to pivot actually, because, speaking about DJ life and sort of the career of building a DJ career, one of the things that we were talking about earlier today that we think, was really relevant and could be something helpful for a lot of people is this idea of perceived value and having confidence in yourself and knowing your own worth. This is something that people come across a lot, especially freelance designers or really anybody with a service. It happens to Mike in his industry, and really anybody with a service or some sort of freelance business. Having an idea about your own value
and setting like an actual dollar amount on what you think you are worth,
right?
It's hard to do that. We kind of touched on this a little bit on the last episode, but we're going to kind of try and break it down a little bit more here.
Yeah, we wanted to get a little bit heavier into this. There's a few things going on right now in life. Different people I know who are experiencing some challenges with careers and things like that, where jobs are going away. They're not sure what to do going forward. And so I've been thinking a lot about sort of this confidence and having the confidence to move on and sort of recognize that change is a good thing. It's scary. Don't get me wrong. It totally is. But I'll tell you a little story about how I got into sort of freelance design and maybe it'll sort of put some of this into perspective. So I used to work for a man. His name's Don Aslett. He's known as the world's #1 cleaning expert. He's a publisher. He's got a gazillion books. He's been New York Times bestseller, all these things. And they were actually sort of my first professional design job. They'd actually hired me as a secretary. But when I came in, I already had dabbled in Photoshop and learned a few different things. And so they gave me an opportunity to work on some other stuff. So I had a lot of opportunity to work on websites, catalogs, mail order, all kinds of interesting design challenges. And in that time, I really started to build a little bit of a base or a foundation for my skill set.
Well, yeah, you had knowledge of what you were doing before you went to work there, and he kind of saw that, and he was able to realize that, he could do this, he can do that. And by working for him, you kind of, worked up your chops. And
well, yeah, because to that point, really the only work I had done sort of professionally was some concert posters for friends, things like that. Nothing big or grand or whatever. But with Aslett, I was working on public-facing things, websites and books and all kinds of other things. So anyway, after doing that, I worked for them for about 5 years. But somewhere in the middle there, I started to develop a freelance business. I started working at night. So I was working for them 8 to 5, and I started working on my freelance stuff, from 6 or 7 at night until 2 in the morning was my rough schedule. During that period of time, of course, it's easier to find work online than it is in person when you're working after everyone's asleep. So we were able to find some clients online, and basically that was sort of the birth of what our company is now. But we started out that way. After a couple more years of doing this freelance at night and working for Aslett during the day, they were put in a position where they had to lay me off, and basically I went out, on my own from that. But basically, and I've heard this from a million freelancers, the nudge that it took to get me out their door is just the push I needed to go into business for myself. By the time that happened, by the time I got laid off, I had sufficient amount of work outside of work to pay the bills and to keep my family afloat and everything else. But I would have never been brave enough to actually take that step.
Yeah. I kind of had a similar situation. I was a truck driver and I got in an accident and they fired me. And at the time I had started building, I've been working as a DJ, getting the business kind of going because I was fairly new to the area. I was there for about a year. And when you start a business, it takes a while to get your clientele built up. It takes a while to actually see the money coming in. But then when I lost that job because of the accident, some lady pulled up right behind me and I couldn't see her in my blind spot, and I was backing up and I backed over her hood.
Oh no.
So it was like, it was unavoidable. I had no clue, but I got in an accident, so they let me go. And so because of that, it forced me to, okay, now I got to go, cold call and try and build some business. And by doing that, I was able to, essentially go from a full-time day job to a full-time, night job as a DJ, but also working during the week to build more clients and get more gigs.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. You, like me, probably didn't have the confidence to just step out and go out on your own. Not a lot of people do. You get used to the security of a steady paycheck, things like that. And it would never even occur to you that, wait a minute, I don't have to do this. I could go out and work for myself.
I'm kind of a unique one. I've been on my own for the most part. Usually when I take a job, it's because I'm new to an area and I haven't built up the clientele or the consistent work that is necessary to be, self-employed. And by I have a very wide variety of skill sets because, I've had to take a construction job and do framing because, that's the only thing I could find at the time. Or I got my CDL driving Greyhound buses. And so it's like, because I'm self-employed, I've had to take part-time jobs to fill in for it. But when you kind of get thrown off the deep end and all you have left is your business, you kind of have to hit the ground running. Having that as a fallback it's always worked out. It's the weirdest thing. It's like when you're starting to stress about money when it's tight and it's not there and you got bills. Sometimes, miraculously overnight, oh, hey, I just got booked for 3 gigs and it's there. It's weird how that works.
Well, and it's funny, like the trajectory that you're describing, where you're taking a part-time job and you're going and doing your other thing. This is probably super common among, sort of entrepreneurial types, folks that are trying to make their own way. But, you got to pay the bills, you got to feed, kids, whatever it is. And so, you take the work you have to take along the way. But what that's actually training you for, and a lot of people may not notice this, but what it's actually training you for is being a business owner or is being a entrepreneur. Because in your own business, especially when you're getting started, odds are you don't just have a pile of cash standing around to build this job or build this new business. Rather, what you have is you and your intellect and your skill set and these things. And you're basically having to build this company and wear all the hats.
Yeah. You have to, if you don't, you're just going to, end up on the side of the street somewhere holding a sign, it's like
which in itself is a skill though, especially if you can do the spinning and the,
totally.
All that stuff. Some of these guys are really good at it.
Yep. I'm jealous sometimes. I wish I could do that.
Yeah. And I wish I could figure out, I guess that's applicable to, a job too. Maybe you could bring that back to work somehow or build that into your business. I don't know. But I want to say that it's a useful skill, but I don't know. Balance is good. It's always going to help you, when you're walking. And, things like that.
We could do 2 things at once. I can multitask.
Yeah. No, a lot of people can't. It's great if you can spin and dance and do a handstand all at once. It's pretty good skill. So, but that's one of the things that a lot of people get discouraged as they're trying to go into business and they're trying to start a company. They look at taking a job as a setback, or they look at anything that is not moving forward necessarily. What it is they're trying to build, it gives them sort of or gives them doubt that, they're not moving in the right direction or that we're building away from what they're actually trying to accomplish. But the reality is that doing all these little odd jobs, having all these different life experiences is actually preparing you even more for what you want to do.
Oh yeah. Like, you've
got to be prepared to suffer a little.
For me, I've been a DJ since, I was 14. So it's always been kind of this little hobby per se, like it never really clicked that I'm kind of turning it into a career. And I always had in the back of my mind, I got to go to school, I got to do this, I got to figure out what I want to do for my day job, I got to figure out like what I'm going to fall back on. And I was having a conversation with another friend a few months ago, and he's probably 10-15 years older than me, and he's been a DJ for a lot longer. And I was like, dude, shelf life, man. I'm gonna be 35, 36, and I'm playing in a club full of 21-year-old kids. Like I eventually have to get out of this, but what am I gonna do? And he was like, why get out of it? I'm like, well, I don't want to be some 60-year-old dude in a club playing. And he's like, okay, so you've been learning this skill, and it's not, it's not something that you can just jump on and figure out. There's a lot of kids that are good and can do it fairly well with little training, but when you actually practice, I spend a few hours a day practicing and learning how to, beat juggle or something like that, and all this talent that I've kind of acquired by doing it. If I just quit, what's the purpose? I mean, it's like it's thrown away.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah. I mean, you've dedicated a significant portion of your life to this thing. So, I mean, yeah, it doesn't make sense to throw it out. And it's funny. I don't know if you know this guy. His name's Gianluca Vacci. He's this like super billionaire Italian cat.
Uh-huh.
So, but he's kind of, I mean, I don't know how old he is actually, but he's grayed out. He's an older guy, but having the time of his life and also DJing right now.
Yeah, I think I saw a YouTube video of something like some 60, 70-year-old man just in a club just rocking out.
He is always on Instagram dancing with his super hot girlfriend, wife, whatever she is. And but what I really like about him, I think I'm not going to aspire to be that billionaire because I recognize how rare that is. But what I really want to try and get out of life is the type of enjoyment he's having. And I don't think it's got all that much to do with the money. Now, granted, that facilitates some of it, but I think that it's really got more to do with an attitude and an outlook on life.
Well, so sidetrack a little bit. Last week, I went on a road trip. I went to see all my friends in Washington. And
Somebody didn't silence their phone.
My bad. I'm sorry. I forgot. So that whole week that I was gone, I went to barbecues. I had a day I spent a week in Chelan just hanging out on the beach and doing work during the day. And, essentially I'm creating the life I want to live, and being able to be mobile and go on the road. I enjoy it. I enjoy driving. I listen to audiobooks while I drive. So granted, most people aren't willing to play until 2 a.m. on a Thursday, drive overnight and play on a Friday. I might be taking it to an extreme a little bit, but by being able to go on the road and setting myself up in a position where I'm mobile like that, I can, if I want to book a gig down in Phoenix, I call a friend and I try and get booked in Phoenix, and then I go spend a week in vacation. I'm creating the atmosphere that I want to be in.
Yeah. Well, and so let's sort of, circle back around to this idea of perceived value and having this confidence to step out. So, because like what both Mike and I have described is sort of this, fact that, well, at least more so for me than Mike, but neither of us were necessarily 100% confident that, or didn't have 100% confidence that, I would go out and be a success. But at the same time, when I took that, when I was nudged out by my former employer when they laid me off, that was finally what I needed. It sort of made everything snap into focus for me. And so, but with that comes some challenges. And both of us as sort of entrepreneur types, Mike and I, it's really interesting the parallels between our two lines of business, because they on the face don't seem that related, but they really do experience a lot of the same challenges. But some of the things that we've had to go through include figuring out our value and figuring out what we cost. And it's really important, whether you're working for somebody and you are laid off and you've got to move on to the next step, next stage of development, or you are trying to advance through a company, or you're trying to apply for a new position someplace, you need to have some idea of what you're worth, what your value is, and what your experience is worth. And so when I first began as a freelancer, our rates were very low. I mean, it makes sense.
Well, weren't you doing like a business card for $35 or something?
Yeah, I mean, for nothing, but a big part of that, one of it was confidence, because I didn't know what a business card was worth. 2, part of it is just growing up. I mean, you have to do the crap before you can do the good stuff. And that's just part of the process. And so we, when I was just beginning as a freelancer, would take all comers. Anybody that needed work done, we'd take them. And what Mike was talking about is we actually used to do business cards for strippers and escorts, and but it was good. It was regular work. I mean, it wasn't a lot of money, but it was money, and that was more than we were making at the time. So that was
didn't
great.
They have like 3 or 4 that every week you had another fresh batch coming
we
through?
always had a new one, so it was good recurring work. And so so that, I mean, for us though, at the time, that was a good gig. And so, but as we started to grow and mature, our value became a little bit higher, and the caliber of clientele that we would bring on were a little higher as well. And so as we've raised rates over the last few years, each time we raise our rate, we're always nervous. We're always afraid to do it. But with every bump in our rate, the caliber of our clients goes up. We find that most people are willing, we've had clients stick with us from the very beginning. And over this many years, we've changed rates a lot, and clearly we're proving our worth, because very few are falling off the wagon.
Well, and I think you kind of have to take a step back and check your calendar, see how busy you are. If you're busy and at your current dollar amount and it's almost too much work where you're pulling your hair out, it's almost worth it to raise your rates, pull your calendar back a little bit where you enjoy life a little more. And then, you're still making the same amount of money that you were making before because you raised your rates. You might have lost 1 or 2, well, in my world, gigs that, you might not have got, but because you didn't take those gigs, you're not running around like a chicken with your head cut off. You're actually enjoying your life and you're still making the same money.
Yeah, well, and I think that's really a good point, the idea of sort of managing your calendar, because that seems like a pretty good metric for when it's time to raise rates. When you find that you're too busy to manage the work you're doing and balance any type of life, it's probably a good time to think about what you're charging. Of course, it's scary to change your rates and to start asking for more money. It takes a certain level of confidence and self-esteem to believe in yourself and your skills to make that jump. But at least in our case, we've been rewarded every time.
Yeah, it's never been a bad thing. We kind of touched on this a little bit last time. How when you get to a certain plateau, you have the perfect client, and then you have if you charge too much, they get more picky, or vice versa. We kind of talked about that. Mm-hmm. But I guess what I'm getting at is it's never been a bad thing to. For me, like I haven't raised my rates to a point where I've completely lost work, but it's always ended up good in the end. Like I've never had any bad problems from that.
Yeah, well, and that's for sure too. Another good point is just that there are good clients and there are bad clients, and when you are young and you're taking on new work and you're trying to find new business, you're more inclined to take on what will ultimately be bad clients. Now, they may get you through a certain phase of growth or whatever, but you will discover eventually that the clients that require the most attention are usually the ones that pay the least.
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, in terms of understanding your own value or your perceived worth, those clients aren't really helping you out as much as you think they are.
So right now I have a venue that I work for that I charge significantly less because they're consistent and they're in a market where I live right now. And so when I'm there, I don't mind giving them a discount because it's a smaller market. They couldn't afford my normal rates consistently. But I give them the discount because it's paid practice. I'm going in and I'm trying stuff out on this venue that I would try when I'm out on the road, and I'll do it one way one week and try it a different way another week, and just kind of put a set together for each month when I'm on the road. I kind of, have something prepared, and I don't mind taking a little less because it's consistent money. When I'm at home, I get paid to practice.
Well, and that's definitely a model. I mean, we even have used that in the past with different clients. Where we'll set up like a retainer style relationship, and in exchange for guaranteed work, we will take a little bit lower rate per hour, which, of course we don't want to discount our rate, but the value of having a steady client, especially when you're growing, is, really valuable. And so I think that that's pretty fair practice. Earlier in life, and I guess even now, I shouldn't say earlier in life, but we're still big advocates for the idea of work for free. And it's kind of controversial because not everybody agrees with it. And it does seem that it's becoming less popular in this sort of recent generation. But it's definitely, for me, paid dividends to do work for free.
Well, it's an internship. Instead of going through your doctorate program and then working for 2 years for free to learn how to work in a hospital, you do a couple posters for free and kind of get your feet wet and figure out, your style, what you're trying to accomplish, and then start charging for it.
Well, and in advertising and marketing, it's almost a foregone conclusion, especially in advertising, that you will be doing some things for free, whether it's just putting together proposals, like, for example, responding to an RFP can be very expensive for an agency because you put a lot of time and a lot of money into preparing this RFP response, but, there's not actually a guarantee on the other end, so you are gambling a little bit on yourself, so it's unfortunate, but it's sort of part of the business. But when you're coming up, if you have an opportunity to work for free under somebody that might be a mentor for you or somebody who could help take you along the way, I think it's totally worth doing. And and the goodwill you create along the way will almost always come back and pay off.
Oh yeah, well, that one client that you did a free poster for 10 years ago, after getting them to be an actual paid client, their friends hire you, and it kind of trickles down from there. You kind of build your business around the people you work with.
Yeah, and you've got to be careful and balance it out, not to be taken advantage of. Just back to the concept of knowing your worth. You can't be taken advantage of, but, if you've got room on your plate to do a little free work or like a lot of times we, at this point, most of our free work is goodwill or charitable things, helping not-for-profits and stuff like that.
Well, didn't you do like a logo for your son's football team or something?
Yeah, little things like that. I mean, who am I going to charge for that? That's kind of on me.
Get all the parents to run them up.
Right, but we designed the logo. That team's full of parents. Some of those parents own businesses. They might see it. And,
well, essentially, it's like... it's your marketing. Like I do a radio show for free once, the C89 mixes that I do. Mm-hmm. That's a station it's a nonprofit station, and it's actually one of the biggest electronic music stations in Seattle, but it's ran through a high school. And so they don't have a budget to pay me to be a mix show DJ, but I do it because essentially I get an hour of free radio time in a major market to get my name out there.
Yeah. Well, it's back to what you alluded to really early in the podcast about networking and how important it is to really network and get your name out there. The littlest thing that you do early in a career or, any time in your career really could end up being the biggest thing you ever did, So that's why it's all the more important to be networking all the time, taking care of people, treating people right, developing these relationships.
Well, and kind of to go back to your perceived value as well. Same story, same situation. There's another radio station in Seattle that was ran by a high school that didn't have the bandwidth or the coverage that, they wanted me to do a weekly, actually twice a week, a mix show during lunch for people working out to listen to, so that, you go on your lunch break, 45-minute workout. So I did an hour mix it twice a week for free. It was my first time working with radio, but it kind of, it turned into this huge ordeal every week. It ended up taking up 8-9 hours of my time just to make these two mixes, because you got to find the songs, you got to make sure they're in key, you got to, it's a lot of prep work to put a mix like that together. And so after about 3 or 4 months of doing this, I'd put my mix out, they'd air it, and I couldn't even hear it in my house. And I'm 5 miles away. And so after doing that, I get discouraged. I'd be like, why am I spending all this time? It's a waste. I'm like, it's good learning experience. I learned how to put a radio show together and how to work with, program directors and charts and make sure that you're, playing the right type of format for the station. And it was a great learning experience, but I just couldn't keep doing it for free because I wasn't doing anything for me.
Well, and that's that give and take we were talking to, that sort of balance, whether you are being taken advantage of or just giving too much of yourself, which is...
I wouldn't say necessarily taken advantage of. I think it was a great opportunity, and it was an awesome... I really am appreciative of Charlie and Jeff, DJ Faze from Seattle. He was the one that got me in there. And, it was a great learning experience, and I actually felt guilty quitting because I felt like I was letting Jeff down, because he extended this olive branch. And I'd only been there for 6 months, but it was taking up so much of my time that I needed to spend elsewhere.
Well, and that's, I think, a normal part of growth and in advertising or any business. There may be clients that just sometimes you outgrow them. In this case, you outgrew that radio show. In our case, we've outgrown clients where, we simply can't afford to keep doing work for them. Either, we may love them. They may be great people.
Yeah, unfortunately for me, I see that kind of written on the wall with a few of the venues I play at, which is hard because you've developed this awesome relationship with people, and financially, it just doesn't make sense to go and play there as much as I have been. So maybe I'm going to have to, be on the road a little less, but
well, and I'm sure that's a battle that most entrepreneurs have to fight, especially in your early career. The people who finally accept you and the companies that finally let you do work for them. They always have like a sweet spot in your heart because they're the ones that gave me the chance. They're the ones that let me do something.
And I don't think they realize how significant a role that is.
Well, no, because for them, they just need a business card or a radio edit or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's for them, it's just I have something that needs done. They don't realize that what they've done is actually giving you your first chance or giving you your break.
My first, because I've been a wedding DJ forever. My first club gig was that bar in Anacortes, the Watertown, and it was a DJ that...
Well, and you worked there until the Watertown closed finally, right?
Well, yeah, it closed a few years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, but I would go there. That's how I got my foot in the door in Anacortes. And the only reason I got that gig was the DJ had surgery, the one that they had been using before. He had some sort of surgery he had to go to, and I came from Tacoma up to Anacortes, which is about a 2.5-hour drive, and played there. And the bartender came up to me afterwards, and she's like, "We want you back every week." And I'm like, "I can't. I live in Tacoma." She's like, "What's it going to take?" So they actually paid up more than they were paying the other guy, and I'd never played in a club before. And so it was a really cool experience, and it got my foot in the door there, and it helped my wedding business because now I'm playing weekly. I'm getting a lot of practice. I'm becoming a better DJ, and so I could eventually raise my rates on weddings as well because of that.
Yeah, no, and those little breaks are really important to everybody. So I think that's probably a pretty common thing that people have in their relationships with clients and things. Is just it's difficult to let somebody go once they were the one that saved you or they're the one that let you in. We have several clients that we probably went on too long with, well after we had raised new rates and things like that. Even though these older clients weren't willing to move up with us, it just, you don't want to quit them. They were the ones.
It's that relationship. It's, it's the whole reason why I still go back to Seattle is because all my friends are there. And so it's nice to see them. It's nice to get the work, and maybe I break even on the trip, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, and there's something to that. It's good to be in a position where you can do the things that you enjoy doing. And, somebody smarter than me, basically said something to the effect that if you enjoy what you're doing for work, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's, really true. I mean, I know you as well as I, Mike, really enjoy what we do. And the work that we do for a living doesn't feel like a slog. It doesn't feel like work. And I feel bad for people who have to go punch the clock someplace or have to, work in a difficult environment or a place that isn't healthy or doesn't feel great for them. And, but it makes me all the more grateful for what I do.
Exactly. And for me, it's just, I hate being told what to do. And that's really what it comes down to, I think, is if they would ask like, "Hey, can you do this?" Sure. But when they start being the boss and being like, "Hey, go do this," I'm like, screw you. I'm going to. So
it's just an anarchist built into you.
Pretty much.
Well, anyway, so I feel like we sort of have hit the subject of perceived value. It's a much bigger topic than this, but there is, it's a really intricate thing, and it is difficult to know your own value. Unfortunately, there's not like a formula that we could just share that would help out with that. Although I feel like we talked a little bit about our experience. But one of the things that Mike and I would like to sort of reach out to our audience and challenge you guys to do is go ahead and do this. We're calling it the perceived value experiment. And basically start to look into your own life and see if you can evaluate your own net worth. We would love to hear from all of you guys about how you arrived at the figure you've arrived at, the transformation that you went through personally or professionally,
good or bad stories. Like if you did something and it totally didn't work for you, I mean, that's the school of hard knocks, and we've been through this.
Yeah. Well, and actually I'm super interested in hearing those type of stories specifically, because I don't know anybody that it's really worked out for negatively, unless you were, sort of dishonest with yourself in terms of what your value is.
Well, if you're not worth, $200 an hour, but you say you are, and then your client realizes real quickly that you're not, then
you can certainly price yourself out of the game. So I suppose there's got to be some failure stories out there. But I would guess that the lion's share of the feedback we'll get will be success stories. And I would love to hear if you guys have any pointers or tips that you would like to pass along to us that we can share on our show to help other people who are going through this challenge. Because I know, starting as a young designer to where I am now, and I'm sure in Mike's business, from a budding DJ to somebody that does it for professionally, it's there's so much to figure out between points A and B, and I think it would be really good for us personally and everybody listening to the show to sort of do a little bit of a perceived value experiment and see what you think you're worth.
Yeah, and actually, if you're kind of further along in your career and you've got a good clientele built up, maybe share your stories with us, like is how you did it, like how long you spent, figuring it out, and when you raised your rates, and when you felt comfortable and why, and we'll share that if
that information is wildly important to anybody coming up as a freelancer or any other service business, really. And I think that it does good for people who have solved, cracked the codes or solved the algorithm, to share their successes and their feedback with the people who haven't quite got there yet.
Yep.
So on that note, we are going to start wrapping up the show, but we wanted to touch base on one last little thing. Some of this networking talk that we got into today was sort of born out of one of these audiobooks that Mike said that he'd been listening to. I have also listened to a portion of it, but I have not made it all the way through. But Mike, can you tell us a little bit about this book? It's called The Accidental Creative by Todd Henry. There's also a podcast by the same name.
So I think Accidental Creative is his agency, and he wrote this book based off of that. But he started, a website with a podcast similar to I would say probably similar to what we're doing, in even as much as that. How I came across him was because I follow a guy named Z-Trip, and he's a major DJ in the U.S. And Z-Trip, I guess the backstory is he had read Todd Henry's book and sent a tweet to him, and Todd Henry was like, "Who's this guy?" And I guess Z-Trip or whatever was playing in one of the towns he was in, and he just thought he was just like another club DJ, so like whatever, And then he comes and sees that Z-Trip's headlining a tour with some major artist. I can't remember who he was with, but it was like, he's opening for this huge artist, and it's a big deal. And so he got back to him, and they ended up doing a podcast together. And I had heard that because I follow Z-Trip on Twitter, and he said something about it. So I went and checked out The Accidental Creative, and it's a really good book. It kind of goes over, a lot of what we've already talked about, but it also goes over some principles that you need to kind of maybe should apply in your day-to-day lives on being, a creative person and how to be brilliant at a moment's notice. And so it's avoiding burnout. It's a bunch of things that you kind of have to pay attention to that you wouldn't until you've already been down the road and screwed it up.
Yeah, and Mike was telling me earlier about one little story in the book that sort of related to this idea of networking and confidence and things like that. And so I think that for people struggling with some of these issues, that might be a really great resource for you in terms of, navigating these sort of rocky roads that we're on right now.
Yeah, definitely a great read. It's not a very long book. I have it on audio format and listen to it when I drive, but it's like, I don't know, hour and a half, 2 hours at the most, but it goes over some pretty good stuff.
Yeah. So anyway, Mike and I have been talking, and we think that one of the things we want to start including is some sort of, moment in the podcast where we share a resource or something like this that we think would be of benefit. Neither one of us claim to be expert of all things or know every little thing. And we think it's really important to, look at the work of other people who have, driven this road ahead of us and then share that information with you guys. So we'll probably start doing something a little bit more formal, a eggs book club or
book
something.
Of the week.
Yeah, we'll see if we can get something going like that. But we just wanted to mention that book. I think it's really relevant to some of the things we talked about today, and like Mike was saying, I think it can help out not just in work but in life and sort of the way to handle different problems as you come across them.
Yeah.
So on that, let's wrap this thing up. For more information about me, Ryan Rogar, or our company, R2 Media Group in Salt Lake City or in Barcelona, you can find us at r2mg.com. Follow us at R2MG on Twitter or at R2 Media Group on Instagram.
For me, you can find me at djontic.com. That's ONTIC, and Twitter /DJOntic.
And to follow the show, we are working on the website, but hopefully by the time you hear this, it'll be up and running. You can find that at eggscast.com. That's EGGSCAST.com. Or you can follow us at Eggs Show on Twitter and Instagram. And please, please, please share this with your friends. Tell your friends and family and coworkers and anybody you can think of. Pass this around and interact with us. It's really important for the success of this show to get a dialogue going with the people who are listening to it.
Exactly. I think that's 100% true. If we can get input from you and hear your stories, then we can kind of, if you have a question, we can do some research and try and come up with an answer.
Yeah. Additionally, we're going to start doing interviews and some other really exciting things in the not too distant future. So if you're interested in being on the show, reach out, talk to us about any of these things, in the subject of perceived value. If you're a pro in this field, we'd love to hear from you because, there are definitely people more articulate and eloquent than us in these matters.
Yeah. All we have is history and experience to go off of, and our history and experiences could be completely different from someone else.
Yeah, so it'd be great to hear from some of those people. But we have some really exciting people on our list. We've got some business owners, we've got musicians, all kinds of people, a wide range of talent and people from all different facets of creativity. So please stay tuned and share the show.
Yeah, so I guess that's it.
Anything else?
No, I'm good.
All right, let's call it done then. So thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.
See you later.